Hello everyone, I'm Professor Paul Carrier of the Western Michigan University Thomas M. Cooley Law School, and I'd like to provide some information that should prove helpful as you are working through the materials for Class 10 of our contracts class. Before I launch into the specifics of today's material, let's remember where we are. We spent the first 8 weeks or so on the concepts of formation. Do we have the items necessary to have a formed bargain? We skip over breach. Assume we have a bargain, right? And if you see an exam question, sometimes it focuses on whether or not there is a bargain. And you have to go deeply into those components, including offer and acceptance. Sometimes the focus of an exam question, an essay question, is not formation, it's basically presumed. They had a contract, there's a breach, what are the damages? And so in such case, using your discretion, properly trained, you would spend much less time on formation because it's presumed, and put your time into discussing the intricacies, the differences, the nature of damages. Okay? So, formation, done. Damages, we're doing now. We skip over breach, and in a Contracts 1 exam situation, if you see damages, you would presume that a breach has occurred. You haven't learned a lot about breach, and you do not do so in Contracts 1. Therefore, if you see a kind of a problem, assume that it did constitute a breach, and then go into a damage discussion when you see a damages-based question. Okay? Last week, we talked about a few things. First, what is the goal of contractual damages? It is to put the non-breaching party in the position that he, she, or it would have been in had the contract been fully performed, right? Very simple. We also talked briefly about two different kinds of damages that courts may use to in fact put the non-breaching party in a position that he, she, or it would have been in had the contract been fully performed. Let me talk about the first box that we talked about a little bit last week. We'll talk about it a little bit now, but then I want you to take that box and move it to week 12. So I'm going to put it away after a minute or two here, and then we're going to come back to it because we'll cover its nuances, its elements, its import in another class. That is equitable damage. And part of your mantra should be, when you're looking at contractual damages and you're looking at whether the court, and it's the court, is going to choose between legal damage or equitable damage as a remedy, you have to remember that courts prefer the legal damages and will only award equitable damages where there is no adequate remedy at law, no adequate legal remedy. And in those cases, the courts can award equitable damages. The two kinds we learned about were specific performance. You must honor the contract and sign over the deed, as an example. Or an injunction. You're going to sing at venue X. You say you don't want to. We don't know how to charge or make you pay the money that venue X would lose. We can't figure out that value. But what we can do is stop you from singing at venue Y on the same night. So you are going to lose the money you would have made singing at venue Y. And that just might induce you to go back to venue X, do the singing, and take the money. Depends. Okay? Now, equitable, again, we're going to wrap that box up and put it aside for a while. With its two possibilities that we've learned about, specific performance and injunction. Now we go back to the big one, which is the primary reason why we have classes 9 and 10. We're talking about legal damages, which are the preferred damages where they are in fact appropriate to put a non-breaching party in the position that he or she would have been in had the contract been fully performed. I've said that so many times now, it's probably now somewhat irksome to you, but keep in mind, you always score points, sometimes small points, when you say things like that when you're discussing damages, right? The goal of damages is, courts have the choice between legal and equitable, but only go to equitable where? Blah, 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 because they favor legal damages, blah, blah, blah. Now you go in, and since legal damage is probably the best, now I break it down into, and that's what we're doing today. We want to talk about general damages and special damages. And a primary idea behind general damages is they are they're completely anticipated. Everyone knows if there's a contractual relationship, that these damages naturally flow from a breach. And so they're easy to plead, they're relatively easy to prove, and courts have a very simple time finding those, valuing those, and providing a money damages remedy for the breach leading to those damages. Okay? Then we have special damages, and those ones are not necessarily anticipated in the situation. The breaching party might not know. And so there are certain damages that would be fully compensatory to the non-breaching party, but there are reasons perhaps why the breaching party should not be responsible to pay for those. Okay? So now again, we're talking about the legal damages as they're broken down, and which ones are shoe-ins, which ones are the simple ones to calculate and award, and which maybe require a little bit more thought before we impose them even on a breaching party. Okay? So we've already talked about equitable and put that to bed. Now we're going to talk about legal, the general kinds that typically flow from a breach. One of them is restitution. If somebody took the construction materials and put them at the job site before a breach, and then there's a breach, well, perhaps the person should be able to get his or her construction materials back. The breaching party does not deserve those, right? Unless he or she pays for them. So if the contract falls apart, the non-breaching party should be able to go and get back his or her materials. If you pay a deposit and the group does not let you use the venue or have your wedding at that hall, shouldn't you get your deposit back? Now, you might put in a non-refundable deposit, and that's a different contractual relationship. But when you pay a deposit and you expect something to be done, and then the other party fails to, in breach of the agreement, you should, as part of your damage, but not all necessarily, get back what you put in by way of, for example, a deposit. Then there is reliance damage. If you undertake expense or trouble in reliance on a contract, perhaps, since it's so well anticipated, the breaching party should pay you for that too. And I would think that an example would best demonstrate what I'm talking about with regard to reliance damage. If you have a factory and I'm buying your widgets, but I'm a small person with a small car, and I'm buying a truckload of widgets, and I'm using my own resources to pick them up from your warehouse, I don't even have to say it. And the breaching party, which would be you in this scenario, would know that I need to hire a truck to go get it. All right? So when I rent a U-Haul to go get those goods, that's something I did not give you. I gave that to a U-Haul company. Okay? See the difference? Restitution is something I gave you. You breach, I should get it back. Reliance is something where I give time, money, effort, services to someone else in reliance on an agreement, and perhaps you should pay me back after breach for that time, that service, that money that I provided to some third party in reliance on our bargain. Okay? And that's also a general damage. Those are highly anticipated. Everyone knows, as a matter of course, that those are a natural part of a contractual relationship, and if there is a breach, those should probably be part of the compensation. Then, of course, there's what I think we would call the compensatory loss. And that is the loss of a bargain. If I were going to buy your house, for example, and for $100,000, and I had another person who was going to buy it from me for $140,000, I don't want your specific house. Okay? I want the $40,000 in profit I'd make when I resell your house 3 days after I bought it from you. If you decide not to sell, you can see there, in fact, and let me bring up a point about that, not to confuse, but hopefully to show another very good distinction. If you don't sell me the house, I lose $40,000. And so the court could simply give me $40,000. And then I would have gotten my profit anyway, and I'm relatively happy. All right? Interesting how I changed the facts a little bit. If you recall in last week's class, we mentioned the quintessential example of equitable remedy being appropriate is sale of a house. If I want your house and not anyone else's, then the only thing that will make me whole is having you deed me the house. In my example, I said, I did not want the house. I wanted the profit on its resale. Okay? That's a perfect example where ordinarily if you wanted the house, equitable remedy would be appropriate. Here all you want is money, and therefore a legal damage, a money damage, is fully appropriate because it would put me in the position that I would have been in had the contract been fully performed. Therefore, we don't give equitable damages there. We would give the legal ones because I just want the $40,000. Okay, when you're buying goods, for example, you're buying widgets. If you have a great price in a contract to buy widgets, that person breaches and you have to buy the widgets from another source at a higher price, the compensatory damage is the extra amount you'd have to pay above the contract price in order to get the alternative source of widget supply. Okay? And then you might also get reliance, you might get restitution. Sometimes you can get those all together. Typically not, though. If you end up getting the entire value of what you would have earned, gained, or benefited had the contract been fully performed, let me give you an example. You pay a deposit of $100, and with that, you're going to get tickets worth $1,000. If the court awards you $1,000, that's what you, or because of those tickets, that's what you would have gotten had the contract been fully performed. So you get your $1,000. And if you ask for your $100 deposit back, you will not get that. Like the hairy hand for the first surgery, that was something that would have been done no matter what. And so that's not part of the breach, that's part of the deal that leads up. So if you have a problem with that, we might be able to try and discuss that a little bit more in class. Okay, there may be an exercise in this week's class that will help us work out issues like that. Okay. Now, those are general damages that are highly anticipated and naturally flow from a contractual breach because they're the natural part of an ordinary contractual relationship. All right? There are special damages as well, and those come in two basic forms, consequential and incidental. A consequential damage is something that happens as a consequence of a breach that it doesn't necessarily flow. For example, I sell you a bad product. You want the money back for the product. That bad product also made you so sick you had $1,000 worth of doctor bills. You want your money back from the product, and you want compensation for the $1,000 of doctor bills. Okay? Those doctor bills don't naturally flow in a lot of cases, so they're probably not anticipated. If they are, you should be able to get them. If they are not, you probably should not. Another example. If I buy widgets from you and you don't sell me the right widgets, I could get the proper widgets and take the price differential and charge you for that. What if I was taking those widgets to sell to a third party, and if I sold them to the third party, my profit would have been $1 million? Are you responsible for me losing that contract where I would have earned $1 million? And the answer is yes, but did I tell you about that? Did you know about it? And if you didn't, maybe I'm not entitled to ask for those. There are also incidental damages. This may be a little esoteric. If a contract is breached and one of the non-breaching party does something to try and fix the breach, that would be an incidental damage. Example, you breach by not buying my widgets. I ship them somewhere else to another ready buyer. That shipping to the other buyer would be incidental to your breach. That would be an incidental damage. You also have to assess whether or not it's chargeable, but most likely it is. Now, the biggest part of Class 10 material we're going to spend the least amount of time on in this video, but we will spend more time in class. First, if you're looking for these special damages, consequential and or incidental, are the amounts certain enough? You lose a contract, how much would you lose? Are you going to lose $1 million? Are you going to lose $2 million? Or don't we know? If damages are not certain, for consequentials, you might not get them. And the courts will have to craft remedies with what remains. Foreseeable. Did the other side, did the breaching party know that you were going to lose another deal or have these other damages if he or she breached? If he or she didn't know, maybe he or she should not bear that risk. If he or she had known, he or she would have charged you more and had insurance to cover the risk. Finally, there is a duty on the part of a non-breaching party to mitigate damage, to avoid damage, to keep them as low as possible. And failure of that means you might not get those damages.